As we continue our focus on prayer, as we continue this time of talking and listening to God, the Psalms are a huge resource for us. There's a great deal of variety within the book of Psalms. All sorts of emotions are expressed. We find people communicating with God in all sorts of ways. Today, we're going to look at Psalm 19. Psalm 19 is a psalm of praise. The psalmist here uses the beauty and the majesty of creation, the stars, the sun, the moon, and the sky, uses the beauty and the majesty of creation as a way of reminding us of God. Psalm 19 says that the sun and the sky and everything above is telling us something about who God is. That the beauty and wonder of God's creation direct our focus and our attention towards God. Then the psalmist talks about the law, about the way God tells us how to live within the creation. And finally, Psalm 19 talks about the presence of God in the life of the person writing the psalm, or from our point of view, the presence of God in our lives. Hear these poetic and powerful words from Psalm 19. The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not yet heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, their words to the end of the world. In the heavens he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from his wedding canopy, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit is to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can detect their errors? Clear from me hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from the insolent. Do not let them have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgressions. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. God, a blessing to the reading and the hearing of the word. When I hear about the beauty and the power of creation and its ability to direct our thoughts and our devotion towards God, it reminds me of the Grand Canyon. We showed some pictures of the Grand Canyon to some friends this weekend. It sort of brought back up those memories and how powerful that experience was. For 16 days this winter, Karen and I and 14 of our friends camped and rafted through the Grand Canyon. And the scale of that place is unbelievable. From the bottom, it's impossible to comprehend how far away the top layer is. We could see snow way up on the top, but where we were, the climate was so much different that there was no snow. It's a huge, huge place. And the Grand Canyon is unbelievably old. The layers of rock go back over all sorts of changes in the earth. Those layers are built of sediments and fossils of life that existed a long, long, long time ago. And the river walls themselves are slowly carved by the motion of the water over time. In the Grand Canyon, we saw wildlife, birds and ducks and geese, bighorn sheep, mule deer. These animals live in the desert, but manage to survive and even thrive in those difficult conditions. And through the desert, there are creeks. And around those creeks, where there would otherwise be red, dusty soil, are green plants that grow up, watered by the water there in the creeks, and offering food and shelter to the animals that live there. There's wonderful views from every angle, cliff faces and greenery up above, and geologic formations slowly but constantly changing everywhere. To use words like beautiful and wonderful and amazing just can't really describe what the place is like. Many of you have been to places that you described in similar ways. views and experiences like that say something to you. Places like the Grand Canyon speak to you. They don't use words. None of the small creeks running through the desert have any words to say, but they remind you of how resilient life can be and of how life-giving and important water is. None of the sunsets make any sound at all, but they tell you something about beauty and even hope and peace. None of the walls talk, but they are filled with stories. There's no words that completely can contain all of the experience, but it points to something higher. All of that majesty reminds us of the care with which creation happens. All of that glory reminds us of the glory of the one who designed it. All of the space and time and history and power represented there remind us of the largeness and the vastness of the one who is able to bring it all about. Without words, the Grand Canyon communicates a lot. Creation helps us to understand something about the character of the Creator. The psalmist says it this way: there is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes all through the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Sometimes when we step into creation, we step into an awareness of the Creator. The world tells us something about the one who made it. All we have to do is notice. We just have to listen. We don't have to go somewhere dramatic or exotic to have this feeling. Every piece of creation says something. Everything in the world tells us something about God. Go for a walk in the woods, or sitting by a pond and fishing. We learn something about God. Enjoying trees as we drive by, or seeing the backyard and appreciating the beautiful flowers, or watching birds at the feeder through the window. We learn something about God. In the delicacy and the intricacy of every bit of creation, we see God's fingerprints. We see the care God uses to create all life, and we are reminded of the care God uses in creating us, of our delicate place within the balance of all of creation. When I first think about connecting with God in creation, I think about being outside, about the wilderness, or at least about the natural world. But the truth is that creation, of course, is not limited to the wild. Just as God's presence isn't limited to places that are open and green. Everything that we experience every day is part of God's creation. We can hear even simple and domestic things telling us the glory of God and proclaiming God's handiwork. God is present when we enjoy a great meal, or when we relax in our favorite chair. I visited Mac Williams not long ago after he had been sick for a little while. When I went in, he was feeling a little better, sitting up, smiling, sitting on his couch. When I asked him how he was, he said, "It's good to be in my spot." When we're in our spot, we can feel the presence of God. God is with us in the comfort of our routines, in the things that bring us peace and joy. Certainly the love of family and friends is a testament to the action of God in our lives, just as we often express our love for God by loving other people, so God often expresses love for us by loving us through those around us. Beautiful buildings like this one express something about God. Even the intricacies of city life, millions of people living, surviving in one place, or even one person stopping their car to let somebody cross the lane in the parking lot in front of them. Each piece of our complicated, interrelated lives can speak to us about the deep, caring, ever-present reality of God woven into the daily fabric of our lives. All that there is can somehow testify to the action of God. Everything points to something larger than itself. When we see something bigger than we are, something like the Grand Canyon or the hustle and bustle of a city or the web of relationships that we live with in our daily lives, when we see something bigger than we are reminded of scale. We exist on a smaller scale than those enormous entities like the moon compared to the sun. We are reminded of scale, and as hard as it can be for us to understand why, we are reminded that we, as small as we are, matter to God. It can be easy for us to feel tiny to feel insignificant, yet we have the sense that God cares about us. God speaks to us. God moves in our lives in grand and in simple ways, in profound and in gradual ways. Very often, simply through the world around us, God speaks to us. God calls to us. Now in Psalm 19, the psalmist makes a bit of a jump. The focus from the beginning has been in the ways that God speaks to us through creation, the ways that creation testifies to God. The sky reminds us of God. The power and the heat and the constancy of the life-giving sun mirrors God's action in our lives. But then the psalmist says, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making simple the wise. That's not a mental connection that we make very easily. When I look at the sunset, I don't usually think, that's beautiful. I should follow all the rules. That's not the thought progression that we tend to have. But the law is deeper than just rules. Certainly, the law is often stated and summarized and described as a list of certain things that we ought to do and certain things that we shouldn't do. But we know that when we read about the law, when we refer to the law, we're talking about something deeper than that. The law is the best way for us to live our lives. The law is God's explanation and invitation of how we can live out our call to be part of creation. What we call God's law is doing what we're supposed to do. We are part of creation. We see ourselves in that role when we intentionally observe the world around us. As part of God's creation, we have a place in the world. When Jesus was asked to summarize the law, when he was asked what was most important, he said this: love God and love each other. When we say the law, we are talking about things that help us to do that. To love God and to love one another. We tend to live complicated lives. We have a lot going on. We have a lot to think about. There's a lot of messages that we hear every day pulling us in lots of different directions. So it's easy for us to get caught up in all of that stuff. Trying to figure out how much we can squeeze in. Trying to figure out how much we can get away with. Or just being so busy and overwhelmed that we never stop to notice or consider anything about the world around us. That's part of the value of the Sabbath. That's why it's so important to take the Sabbath seriously. That's why that's one of the top 10. One of the 10 commandments. The Sabbath challenges us to stop. To look around, to absorb what we see, to see God at work in the world around us. On our Grand Canyon trip, we didn't spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do. There were no discussions about where to go out to eat, or which TV show to watch, or how we could best avoid traffic. The distractions were all removed. I can see what the psalmist means about the beauty of creation being tied in with our ability to know what we're doing, to be able to recognize and follow God's law. When we move aside from the distractions, we are more fully aware of ourselves. We know who we are and what we're doing. We're able to see ourselves as part of the larger picture, as part of creation. We're able to see the impact we have on those around us. So we're better able to understand the implications of our actions, and we can act in ways that more fully express the love we want to show to others. Pausing to reflect, to seek awareness of God, allows us better to understand what God is calling us to do and who God is calling us to be. Last week, we talked about listening to God. We talked about the need to listen for directions. As we consider who we are as a church, and as we continue to figure out the best ways that we can share the gospel in our community, as we continue to figure out the best ways we can move forward as a church, listening is crucial. In addition to our Sunday morning gatherings and our Wednesday night prayer meetings and Bible study, we have groups meeting twice a week to pray, Tuesday mornings and Thursday nights. Groups are coming together to listen for God. We are in a period of listening. And as we listen, I want to challenge you this week to do two things. First, go somewhere or do something that you don't usually do to seek out God. For most of us, it's not going to be something dramatic like running off to the Grand Canyon. But try to do something that you can do to look for God's presence. Something you wouldn't have done otherwise. Enjoy a sunrise. Or, for some of us more realistically, enjoy a sunset. Take a walk. Walk in your neighborhood or walk in the woods. Or have a cup of coffee. Just sit and enjoy your surroundings. Go help someone who you wouldn't usually have helped. Or come to church or go to a friend's house to pray. Think of something that you don't usually do and do it in a way that reminds you of God's presence. Look for God somewhere that stands out. That's the first thing I want to challenge you to do. The second is this. Look for God somewhere common. Seek to feel God's presence in something that you do every day. In the hug of a family member or in the smile of a child you see in the hallway, in the simple familiarity of your breakfast routine, or in the peace of a short break in the afternoon. Try to notice God. God cares about you. God pays attention to you. God is aware of every detail of your day. Some people will try to use each pause in their day to pray. When waiting in line, pray for the person in front of you and behind you. When you're in a waiting room, think of the others who are in need and ask God to be with you as well. Paul tells us to pray without ceasing. So this week, I want to encourage us to intentionally try 2 times to notice God's presence. Once in our regular lives, in our daily routine, and another time to seek out God in something specific, in something we wouldn't have done otherwise. For those of you who are on Facebook, I'm going to post this challenge onto Facebook. And so if something happens and you think, wow, I saw God there, respond. Put it on Facebook. It doesn't have to be profound. It's not going to be something that's published to a wide group, but here with our church. For those of you who aren't interested in Facebook, mention to somebody else. When you see somebody from the church, when you see somebody from outside, hey, I saw God this morning in a sunrise. Or I saw God this morning while I was eating my breakfast. Twice this week, try as we listen for God to notice God somewhere you wouldn't have noticed God otherwise. As we do that, as we seek out the awareness of God, as we seek to see God in the stars, in the sky, as we seek to see God in smiles and in friends and in love. As we do that, we will be more aware of the presence of God as the creator of everything that is, and we will be more aware of our own place as creatures, as people created as part of that world, as people called to be part of God's creation. We are the children of God. Let us seek to recognize God in all that we do.